Hello my people, it is your brother Vandor. So the year of 2022 has already been fairly epic, and it's literally only been a month. The month of January was jam-packed with crazy and impactful political and social stories. We are here to talk about a couple of those incidents. It is time, my people. Let's dive in. So at this point, I'm certain that you've already heard about the Joe Rogan, Neil Young versus, because they are having a moment right now in our political climate in which they are adversaries. Now, these people are not in the same category. I don't think that Joe Rogan makes music, and I don't think that Neil Young has offered a lot of political commentary. However, they are both on the same platform. I am indeed talking about Spotify. So this whole incident all happened around the middle of January when Neil Young told his record executives in a now deleted letter that they need to remove his music from Spotify if Joe Rogan's platform, if his podcast was still going to be on the Spotify platform. The reason why Neil Young wanted his music off if Joe Rogan's podcast was still on is because of Neil Young is citing the 270 doctors or other scientists or other folks who claim that Joe Rogan is spreading misinformation on his podcast about coronavirus vaccines. So Mr. Joe Rogan is a very out there political commentator, podcast, American figure. He is controversial. He is responsible for the UFC hosting. He is a lot of stuff. He was a former Fear Factor host. Mr. Joe Rogan has encapsulated what it means to be an American celebrity, because he has had his moments of ups and downs, and right now he is on a up. Mr. Joe Rogan has the highest listened to podcast, the most active listeners of almost anybody around. So imagine Spotify's surprise when Mr. Neil Young, who only receives about 6 million active listeners every month, versus Mr. Joe Rogan's 11 million listeners every episode. Imagine their surprise when they see this ultimatum. Well, they can tell you what they did. In fact, everyone can tell you what they did, because they took his music down. They took Neil Young's music down and kept doubling down on Joe Rogan. And it would be illogical for them to do anything else, because being a company based upon financial profit margins, it would be stupid for you to cancel your number one podcast. However, even with all of that said, and the financial reasons why they kept Joe Rogan, even with the fact that Mr. Joe Rogan's podcast is one of the highest watched and listened to podcasts of all times, even with that, and Spotify's numbers and them having an immense amount of artists and listen to music and whatnot, with one artist, Mr. Neil Young, deciding to leave, and also subsequently Joni Mitchell and some other figures have decided to leave, some lesser figures than Neil Young have decided to leave. Even with that small impactful hit, you wouldn't assume that they would have lost a lot of money. However, they did. So it is estimated that they have received a market value loss of up to $2 billion. So $2 billion market loss just because they lost Mr. Neil Young. It seems like that both parties got what they wanted, because even though Spotify took a major hit, they are not going to be controlled. They are not with the cancel culture. They are not with the social diaspora of people telling them what they can feature. And I support them for that. However, Mr. Neil Young, the reason why he is so gung-ho on vaccines is because he caught polio at a very young age. He caught polio and got sick. So he's always been a staunch supporter of vaccines. So misinformation to him is a personal threat. So for him taking his music off Spotify, which he wanted to do earlier, I didn't cite that, but he also wanted to do this earlier before. He's threatened to remove his music off Spotify before because of the sound quality issue and other things. But now he's finally got his music off of Spotify. And I tell you, morally and based upon principles, Mr. Neil Young has won, because with Spotify having a $2 billion market loss, it's clear to me that he is the winner. Now, I'm sure he didn't even know his impact was going to be so great. However, with the reverberations and the Joni Mitchells and the sponsors and the misinformation campaign by the doctors to try to let Spotify know that they are doing wrong, with all of those things, they have clearly succeeded to some pressure, because after all of this, they have decided to put in new protocols to make sure their podcast and content is not actively spreading misinformation. They've even said they've removed thousands of accounts that actively are spreading misinformation. However, the one account they definitely have not removed is Mr. Joe Rogan. So this story is going to continue to brew, and we will definitely be watching it. But this is one of 2022's very interesting sagas. Now, let's go on to the next one. Now, this next story is straight out of 2022 because the vibes are absolutely ridiculous. Imagine you are a politician and pew, 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 people are shooting at you. In fact, people are physically carjacking you. You don't have to imagine anymore, because this happened to two politicians just in the month of January, both of them being African American and both of them being on the Democratic spectrum of things. I am, of course, talking about the DC politician Nate Fleming. Mr. Fleming was carjacked in DC, I do believe in the morning, in his district. That he is running for. He is running for city council, but he is a longtime DC politician. So he was getting out of his SUV, and some dudes came up in another car, I think a BMW, came right up to his car and ordered him to remove himself from the vehicle's premises. No one got whiplash. There was no physical violence, but it was heading in that direction. Mr. Fleming ran into the gas station for refuge and then later tweeted that he is shocked and can't believe in his own city that these things are happening. Unfortunately, to the politicians like Mr. Fleming and other Democratic members of Congress and Democratic members of local state houses and whatnot, when you inject the Democratic talking points of defunding the police and you de-strengthen your police units by taking away their fundage and limiting the kind of weapons and the kind of tactics they can do to address these hardened criminals. When those things happen, when resentencing guidelines happen and people who should be still behind bars are freed, when those things happen, you get an influx. You get an influx of crime in your local area. And I am so sorry that Mr. Nate Fleming, a DC politician, has gotten robbed at gunpoint. However, to all of the people who live in DC, whose story will not be on the news, who does not currently serve as a politician for the state of Washington, D.C., all those little people who routinely get carjacked and mugged and harassed and assaulted by violence on the streets, they are probably not caring as much. They probably, in fact, want to see some of their politicians deal with the real problems. Now, I, of course, am not Fox News, and I, of course, would never say that they should have been a victim, been assaulted, been targeted because of their political affiliation, or because of the fact that they are in Congress, or the fact of any reason. I don't want anybody to be harmed. But that also goes for the local and regular people of Washington, D.C. When you make policies that make it easier for bad guys and make it easier for people who have horrible criminal records to repeat their crime and continue to perpetuate insanity and victimization in the community, when you allow those things to happen, you are complicit. And I am, of course, talking about Miss Cori Bush. Miss Cori Bush is very similar to Nate Fleming in the politics department. They see the police as the enemy. Now, Miss Cori Bush certainly didn't see the police as the enemy just a couple days ago in January, because she called the police. They came out to her car. Her and her staff came out to her car, and they noticed that her car was riddled with bullets. Her car was riddled with bullets left and right. The tire was flat. So she immediately went back into the place that she was in, called the police. The police came out on the scene. They conducted an investigation. Now, I find this a little bit funny. And slightly hypocritical when you immediately call the police when you're trying to defund them, when you are actively trying to defund them and restructure our police department. So imagine if they hadn't been there. Imagine if Miss Cori Bush had been in her car at this time. They would have probably still called the police, but things could have ended way more tragically. Thank goodness that Miss Cori Bush wasn't in the car, and thank goodness that this story is getting some press so we can understand the realities of the situation. Because being Missouri's first black congresswoman has its perks. People know you, your name is out there, you're famous, you're a political figure, but it also has its shared responsibility. You should be protecting the people in your constituency. You should be making sure that these people have the safest climate around that they could possibly have. And I'm not talking about climate change. I'm talking about just literally going out into the street, out into the elements, and not getting shot, not getting mugged, and not getting your car shot up when you're a politician. These people have to deal with this on a daily basis. And when you preach this reform the police, restructure the police, when you preach all of those things and down the police unions and down the police unity, the support, the community members who are policing your community, you make it harder for those people who live in your constituency to do the things that they're trying to do. Go to the convenience store, go to church, go to school. So shame on you, Cori Bush, because these are the types of problems people in your district where you were elected are facing. And the fact that we are not directly addressing these things more with more policing, better police training, the fact that we are not directly addressing this with better resentencing. We should not do the resentencing guidelines that allow these violent criminals to get out. We should be sentencing them to even harsher penalties, because if somebody is going to commit a violent crime, they should not get out of jail anytime soon. That is my personal opinion, and I will say there's probably a little bit of bias with that, because I too grew up in a community similar to Mrs. Cori Bush's Missouri violent St. Louis streets. I too grew up in a place that was less safe than a politician's neighborhood. So for me to see this story and for her to continue to be perpetuating the same type of rhetoric that allows these violent people out and allows these people to come back out with guns and come back out with all kind of things, even though they've been proven to be bad and negligent and disrespectful and non-caring about the community, even though they can continue that, we allow this rhetoric to occur. So no more defund the police, Cori Bush. I want to see you on the side of the police. I want to see you on the side saying that we need better and higher quality police officers. No more resentencing guidelines, Cori Bush, because I don't want to see you talking about how people need lighter and lesser and more lenient sentencing. I would like to see you talk about the mental health. I would like to see you talk about these other issues that lead these people to do these things. So, with that said, that is just one more story in these crazy times that we're in 2022. And again, this is only in the month of January. So first, we got Neil Young and Joe Rogan's fighting and the cancel culture's here. Meghan, that's got a hint of Meghan. It's got a hint of Harry with the royal touch. People are now saying that Meghan and Harry are complicit because they too did not remove themselves from Spotify. So we got all that. Then we got this Cori Bush and Congress people getting shot up. Bam, bam, bam. Oh my God, crazy. Not only just that, the blizzard in the Northeast and all kind of crazy phenomenon. But it is not to outdo this last story. It is time, my people. Let's dive in. All right, so nothing that you have heard thus far is going to outdo this story. This particular story definitely sounds like it should be in a movie. So, a woman was just driving, and she's behind this truck. Everything's going about, just fine. Unfortunately, this truck collided with a tow truck, right? Boom, big impactful impact. Luckily, the woman who was driving stayed far away enough from the incident to be okay. Her car wasn't damaged, nothing had happened. Unfortunately, the same cannot be said for the two cars that were in this particular situation. The tow truck was severely damaged, and of course, this bigger truck was severely damaged too. What was unknown to the people at the time was the bigger truck carrying cargo was actually hauling live monkeys. So again, unfortunately for this lady, she didn't know any of this information, and she seen something scatter across the road, assuming that these live monkeys were just little kitty cats or zoo cats, or she thought that they were cats. That's what she said in a statement, that they were cats. So she went up and said, "Here, kitty, kitty," to one of the crates. Unfortunately, the cat, in theory, was not a cat at all. It was in fact a macaque monkey from an African island. So this monkey, in fact, did not meow, but hissed at the woman and spit on her face. The woman immediately retreated, and she found the local people on the scene when they arrived. These people were in business suits and very highly specialized vehicles. The woman said it looked extremely government, and in fact it was. These people were in fact from the CDC, and these monkeys, macaque monkeys from Africa, weren't just any monkeys. They were CDC lab monkeys. So the woman got advice to go to the doctor and isolate herself immediately. She did exactly that, and the doctor said that the woman had contracted pink eye. Not too much longer, she started developing other symptoms. Coughing, sneezing. In fact, it were COVID-19 symptoms. So the woman got a COVID test and she came up negative. However, people around her have said they have tested positive. And the CDC says there's nothing to worry about when it comes to these monkeys. The saga doesn't stop there though. The monkeys were actually mostly all apprehended on the scene immediately. All 97 of them. Unfortunately, there were 100 monkeys. So 3, in fact, escaped, and a search ensued. They called the helicopters with the infrared cameras. They called wildlife, nature and wildlife, they called all of the resources they could to find these monkeys. And it was a full-scale hunt because they didn't want these monkeys to infect the population with Lord knows what. Some of the residents were very concerned because they have bobcats and wildlife and all kind of other things. Why would the CDC go so gung-ho over just a couple of monkeys? Unfortunately, the efforts resulted in finding these monkeys, but not being able to bring them back alive because the CDC had made a snap decision on the scene when all 3 monkeys were located later that night and decided to humanely euthanize all of the monkeys. Now, many of the people nearby said they heard gunshots and said that the monkeys were shot down as soon as the CDC apprehended them. However, the CDC says they did what they did to protect the community and protect the monkeys. I don't know exactly how or what these monkeys are going to be used for, but I do know that this story is absolutely wild. If I hadn't heard this on the news, I wouldn't believe that it was true. It seems like such a fabrication. And also, my question is, CDC with 100 monkeys, didn't you guys learn your lesson from the beagles? Mr. Fauci, I know you guys heard about that. Dr. Fauci killed those beagles, connected to the Wuhan lab. I don't know. We're not here to spread conspiracy theories. But I do find it very odd that the CDC is needing 100 monkeys. I mean, damn, y'all can't use 5? I mean, how many trials and error? What are you doing? And the fact that they would even have said the word humanely in any of this is nonsense. All right, my people, this has been an epic January, but I'm going to leave you with these words. The cancel culture needs to stop. Stop the police and the police resistance needs to stop because crime is at an all-time high. And the CDC needs to simmer down. I don't know what they're doing with those monkeys. And you know what? I really probably don't want to know what they're doing with those monkeys because my heart would be unsettled. 2022 has a lot in store for us, but if you think that this year is going to be a docile and quiet, a low-key simmer down, you are drastically mistaken. This year is sure to produce some impactful, epic stories, and your brother Vandor is going to be here to cover them. Make sure to subscribe, hit that like button, and drop a comment if you can, because we are only just getting started. It is time, my people. Let's dive in.